So thank you everybody for being with us. I would like to introduce you Ruth and David Masher. They are great supporters of the Hebrew University's Shluchei Tzibur program, which is a wonderful program for Haredi Jews studying at the university. David is also on the board of Netzach Educational Network, consisting of 7 schools with more than 1,000 Haredi boys and girls who study both religious and secular subjects. Currently, the schools are completely online because of the present COVID-19 lockdown. The founder and director of Netzach is Rabbi Menachem Bombach, graduate of the Hebrew University's Shluchei Tzibur program. The Hebrew University is a family affair for the Mashers, beginning with David's grandfather, Mordechai Kaplan, who was one of the founders in 1925. David's parents were on the board of governors, and his brother, Zichrono Livracha, was professor of chemistry. Ruth and David's children and in-law children attended the Rothberg School at the Hebrew University. So David and Ruth, the floor is yours now.
Well, thank you very much, Mara. Ultra-Orthodox Jews, or Haredim, comprise 12% of the population of Israel, according to data from the Taub Center for Social Policy Studies in Jerusalem. The fertility rate of Arabs has fallen and approximates that of non-Haredi Jews. But all of these rates still approximate only 1/2 that of Haredim. Thus, projections indicate that the percentage of Haredim in the Israel population will increase to 26.6% by 2059. As a response to the Israel government's decreasing family support, Haredim have been increasingly going to work. The primary breadwinner of Haredim are women. Approximately 80% of Haredi women work versus 45% of Chabad or Sephardi men, or only 25% of Litvaks or Hasids. Thus, our speaker's talk on ultra-Orthodox women integrating into Israeli society, redefining their identity, is particularly important. We are fortunate to have with us Professor Michal Frenkel, who is the chair of the Hebrew University's Department of Sociology and Anthropology. She is also the head of the Shaine Center for Research in Social Sciences at the Hebrew University. She was a Fulbright scholar at Harvard and a visiting scholar at Harvard, Brandeis, and Smith colleges. She has published extensively on Israeli society, gender, race, nationality, and religiosity within and around organizations, on center-periphery relations in organization studies, international management, and work-family arrangements. Her research interests include gender, ethnicity, class, and religiosity in and around organizations, as well as organizational aesthetics, globalization, and the sociology of Israel. Her most recent work documents how Israeli employers allow Haredi women to work in high tech and how these women respond to the working environment in order to maintain their status as Haredi Jews. I'm happy to turn over the microphone to Professor Frenkel, who will speak on ultra-Orthodox women integrating into Israeli society, redefining their identity.
Thank you so much. I'll try to share my screen with you, and I hope to share the right screen because I have, okay, do you see my screen?
Yeah. Yeah, and Michal, just a second, I would like to explain to all our public that the lecture will be around half an hour, but you can ask questions during the lecture, either in the chat, or in the question and answer box, or you can raise your digital hand and we'll open your microphone later. So go on, please.
So thank you, Mara. and hi everyone. I'm happy to have you here, and thanks for coming. And I wish I could see you all, or in person, or on my screen, but this doesn't work that way with webinars. And thank you so much, Mr. Mosher, for your kind introduction and for an even kinder contribution to the Hebrew University in general and to the Shluchei Tzibur program in particular. My talk today looks at the integration of the Ultra-Orthodox community into the broader Israeli society, and I'll focus on women and their integration into the high-tech sector, but integration takes many different forms, and making sure that the Ultra-Orthodox community has an academic leadership in parallel to its rabbinical leadership is crucial to such integration. And Shluchei program has a lot to do with these challenges, and the challenges that I'm going to address in my talk today, because those ultra-Orthodox professionals who attend the program move on to become a bridge between their communities and the academic knowledge and discourse. As the Ultra-Orthodox community's response to COVID-19 demonstrates, this program is not enough. We need more research and more knowledge about the Ultra-Orthodox or Haredi community and other groups and communities in Israel to develop a better way to integrate them into the broader Israeli society. I'm proud to say that my colleagues at the Department of Sociology and Anthropology at the Hebrew University and our graduate students are increasingly involved in such studies and in translating these studies into a civic initiative and public policies that would hopefully help us be more prepared for for future crises. So my goals today in today's talk is to convince you that the integration of the Ultra-Orthodox community into the broader Israeli society is one of the most burning challenges Israel is facing today. I would like to introduce the way these challenges and their remedies affect Ultra-Orthodox women and how their integration into the labor market, especially in the high-tech sector, is seen as a first step towards such integration. I would like to introduce the challenges these women face when caught in the matrix of conflicting interests and demands placed by their own community, by employers, and by the state. And I would like to present their collective coping mechanisms and their consequences for these women and for Israeli society in general. So David was able to kind of present many of the issues that characterize ultra-Orthodox society and its place in Israel in general. As he mentioned, the Ultra-Orthodox community comprises about 10 to 12 of Israel's population. What's important for me is so most of you are familiar with the phenomenon in general. Most of you are familiar to one extent or another with Ultra-Orthodox or the Haredi community. And as you probably know, this is an enclave community that seeks to maintain a traditional lifestyle by segregating themselves from the rest of the world and adhering to rabbinical authority. Broadly speaking, this community is divided into 3 or 4 different communities: the Lithuanians, Hasidim, Sephardim, and in today's Israel, we should also refer to a 4th group, the modern Orthodox, like the students that I've mentioned earlier to some of you. While different in their lifestyles and identities, and even in their view of the workforce participation and level of self-segregation. In the Israeli context, the different sects collaborate politically, and this is very important in the context of this talk. This collaboration grants them an unproportional political power, which they use to secure state sponsorship for their lifestyle and for their educational and cultural autonomy. For the sake of today's talk, what we need to remember about this community is its tight internal organization and members' a complete and utter dependency upon the community's voluntary education, from kindergarten to yeshiva to seminars to matchmaking services, financial support, and that this access to all these services and benefits is conditioned upon members' obedience to rabbinical authority. Rabbis and their representatives are involved in each and every aspect of Haredi personal life. And this is very important. It's not about faith, or not only about faith. It's about internal organization. It's about control of members' lives. And this is an important aspect of how this community is handling itself. In a nutshell, it is this combination of political power and the cultural and institutional autonomy or independence that poses one of the most significant social and political, and now also medical, challenges to the future of Israeli society. Let me start with COVID-19. I'm sure that many of you are interested in this issue and the way Israel responses to COVID-19. And Israel's response illustrates the challenge that the integration of independence and autonomy of the Ultra-Orthodox community poses for Israel's society. So since March, and you can see the graph, since March, the Ultra-Orthodox community has taken the greatest hit when it comes to the spread of the virus. Despite a growing awareness of the potential risk of the pandemic back in March, Haredi rabbis refused to close synagogues and yeshivas or to order their community members to take measures to prevent the spread of the virus. As it happened, Yaakov Litzman, one of the leaders of the powerful Ultra-Orthodox party, Agudat Israel, was the Minister of Health when the pandemic outburst and in charge of designing Israel's policy to fight the virus. And taking his cues from the rabbis, Litzman refused to impose lockdown on Haredi institution, although and allowed Haredi men from the United States mostly to enter Israel without screening, and did not stop the Purim carnivals throughout the Haredi world, which was later identified as one of the main hubs for pandemic spread. As you can see in this graph, in which Haredi community is represented in red, a third of Israel's COVID-19 caseload are Haredi, are Ultra-Orthodox from the Ultra-Orthodox community. Yet, out of fear of stigma, Haredi Knesset member, a parliament member, refused to allow a lockdown on the Haredi cities only and led to a general lockdown on the entire country during the Jewish high holidays to prevent more casualties. As soon as the lockdown was removed, and while the rest of the country's educational system remained closed, Haredi boys went back to yeshivas, refusing to adhere to state's law and regulation, and Haredi leadership has also called for its followers to refuse medical screening for COVID-19 and offer an in-house medical treatment by community members to prevent authority from knowing the extent of the virus spread within the community. So this combination of self-segregation and political power and autonomy, cultural and institutional autonomy, has proven deadly in the context of Israel during COVID-19, but it also exposed the challenge Haredi independence poses for Israel's ability to meet other social and economic challenges. David has mentioned earlier that the Ultra-Orthodox community constitute 10 to 12% of Israel's population now, and the prediction is that by 2030, in 10 years, the Ultra-Orthodox population is expected to count for 16% of Israel's population, so it's huge. And David also mentioned that Haredi men rarely participate, or their participation in the labor force is very low. As you can see, while men's participation is low, women's participation is almost identical to secular women's participation in the labor market, and this is a very important evidence or fact. Since Haredi men are expected to stick to college life, to study religious studies throughout their lives, official participation in the labor force is very low, making women the breadwinners. And I should also mention that men often work unofficially. I mean, they do all kinds of jobs while registered as college students or yeshiva students, and this is all done in, undocumented work. They don't pay taxes for that, and they still get the stipend that the state and some donors are offering to yeshiva and college students. With very high fertility rates in this community, around 6.5 children per household on average, it is no wonder that together with the Arab population, the Haredi population is the poorest in Israel, a poverty that is often described as a voluntary one. 55% of ultra-Orthodox children live below the poverty line in Israel, as compared with 9% among other Jewish children. So it's huge. And given Israel's universal commitment for minimal standard of living, the ultra-Orthodox community relies heavily upon states' welfare payment, presenting the country in a very bad light in international and comparative indexes. So again, a challenge. And this is where women come in. If men have to study and women do not, they are the ones expected to support their large families. As we could see in the previous slide, the women participate in the labor market, in the labor force, is much higher than that of men, and almost matches secular women's participation rates. But the plot gets complicated when taking into consideration the other features of the Haredi community all over the world, and especially in Israel. Mar, who organized this meeting, has promised me that the chances that you have all seen the popular Netflix series Unorthodox. I cannot know if you have, but if you haven't, please do. But while not all Haredi communities treat women the same way, they are all expect them to marry young, shave their heads as soon as they are married, have as many children as possible and accept the intervention of rabbis and family members in their most personal affairs. But while Haredi boys in Israel are not almost always not exposed to general secular education, girls are. So while their modesty and sexuality are closely monitored throughout their life, and especially until they get married, the ultra-Orthodox leadership was forced to accept the fact that their female members will have to integrate into the general Israeli workforce. First, within the enclave, working within the ultra-Orthodox community, mostly as kindergarten teachers, shop owners, and so on and so forth. And later on, when there were no more jobs and still a need for women to join the labor force and support their families in mixed Haredi secular environments. For several reasons that I don't have the time to discuss here, and I'll be happy to discuss if you are interested in the Q&A part. The Israeli blooming high-tech industry has become the most highly coveted destination for these women, and about 6.5% of all ultra-Orthodox female workers are now working in the high-tech field. This is huge. It's almost the same amount, the same percentage as secular women. So from here on, I would like to share with you, this is a kind of a general introduction, and from here on, I'll discuss my own research together with Professor Varda Wasserman from the Open University in Israel, who used to be my graduate student and now is a colleague and co-author. And we looked at ultra-Orthodox women in the high-tech industry. And why high-tech? Why tech? Because there is high demand and relatively high salaries. So when women considered, or the state or the communities considered ways to push ultra-Orthodox women into the labor market, they decided that the high-tech is the best option for them. Although they earn much less than their secular colleagues, they still earn much more than in the field of education, for example. So this was a good option for them. Another important explanation for this choice is that the high-tech in general is more open to diversity management, and high-tech employers, maybe because they need this workforce so much, they were willing to cater for Haredi women specific needs. So the first step was for Haredi seminars for girls, for women, to introduce studies of technology. At first, it was very, very basic. They were trained to become teachers of technology, but later on, they learned more and became low-level developers. This is one of the problems. It's not an academic degree. Now the Open University is offering ways to turn their studies into degrees. Employers in the high-tech are not very satisfied with the level of training that they get in the seminars, but this was the first step. And as women were joining employment in the high-tech, employers discovered that they are doing a good job, they are willing to study, and we're hiring more and more of them. So they're there, but as could be expected, their integration was not that simple. And in our study, what we realized is that this integration was very, very complicated, and that these women were, the challenges that they were facing came from the fact that they were caught in the matrix, a matrix that we called, Valda and I called, the unholy trinity. Between the state, employers, and their own community, they were facing conflicting demands, requirements, and expectations, and they had to move and maneuver between these different expectations in order to, on the one hand, be considered good employees and be promoted or to keep their jobs, and on the other hand, they had to accept communities' limitation or regulation in order to keep their identity as ultra-Orthodox women. And you may remember that I started by saying that access to the services that the community offer to its members is conditioned upon the adherence to rabbis' authority. And if the rabbis decide that you somehow interfered with community's life and your work is not a legitimate one, your kids will not be allowed into schools and yeshivas and seminars. Your status in the community will be reduced to nothing, and you'll find it very difficult to marry your children. So they were forced to do the two things at the same time: adhere to employers' demands and adhere to rabbis and the community's demand. And this is very complicated, and this is what I would like to talk about. So I want to say something about those conflicting demands. So we interviewed many state officials who are responsible for the integration of ultra-Orthodox women and men into the labor market, and we realized that the state is taking a neoliberal stand in its way of thinking about the integration of these women. And what one of the state's official was telling us, this is a woman, she said, we realized that to get above the poverty line, these big families need 2,000% of job, 2 full-time jobs or earning. But we also know that the rabbis do not want the men to leave the kollel. And they can maybe work, and women can maybe work for 6.5 hours per day. But we realize that it's better for them to work these hours in the high-tech sector, where the salary is a little higher than in education, and where they cannot even make a minimum wage. It's a start. We hope that in time they will realize that they can do more for their families by earning more and become like regular workers. And to achieve this goal, the state has directly subsidized women's employment as long as employers were hiring more than 5 women simultaneously. And employers' perks were not part of the deal and were not enforced by the state. So we need to realize that the state didn't care about equality, equal pay, equal rights. The state only cared about the integration of these women into the labor force and making sure that they rely less upon welfare payments. The more they earn, the less their families get from the state as welfare payments. But you can sense that because of that way of integration, because the state forced these employers to hire at least 5 women at the same time, they also joined the labor force as a group, not as individuals. And this is very important. From the employer's point of view, they have taken a business case approach, looking at Haredi women as local cheap labor, but also applying diversity management lingo to account for their inclusion. So this is very important. Employers often talk about these women as, local Indians. We are looking for cheap labor. It was very inconvenient for us to have our subsidiaries in India. The time difference is making it very, very difficult to manage this group. Here we have a group of cheap workers who are in Jerusalem. So we can hire them, we can monitor them, we can still speak Hebrew to them, and we still get them for cheap. So one of the employers told me, we needed workers for simple tasks here, and we prefer to have them here and not somewhere in India. So it's a win-win for everyone. We have the workers we need, and some of them are very good and eager to learn. They make more money than the regular ultra-Orthodox, non-high-tech ultra-Orthodox workers. And with state subsidies, employers had the incentive to integrate women and allow communities representatives to join the workplace to monitor its compatibility with the community's religious requirement for acceptable women's behavior. Think about it. Can you imagine this happening in your countries where, the employer hires a rabbi? He is not a real rabbi, a representative of the community, a man, obviously, paying him much more than to his high-tech women. And this person monitors Haredi women's behavior, making sure that they don't watch something that is inappropriate on their computers, that the computers need to be kosher, that the food needs to be kosher, and that they don't speak too much to each other or to other people, that they're focused on their jobs. We had many, we learned a lot, or we heard many stories about the way these rabbis are introducing women into the workforce and monitoring not only their religious behavior, but also their commitment to their workplace in order to make sure that employers will prefer other Haredi women in the future. So this is also very important. Because of these rabbis, on-the-job rabbis, ultra-Orthodox women are actually organized. They are semi-unionized because someone else is dealing with the employers on their behalf. But while the state and employers may be expected to take a neoliberal approach, it is maybe surprising to see the Haredi community leadership collaborating with this approach. While their priority has remained the regulation of women's modesty and religious behavior and the maintenance of men's ability to focus on their studies, from their point of view, the integration of women as cheap labor also serves the community's interests. Importantly, it was important for the community that they will remain cheap labor. And this idea is rarely expressed publicly, But the women we interviewed often mentioned that this is the rabbi's interest to keep them cheap, to keep their earning low. And one of the only official citation that we could find from one of the newspaper, Haredi newspaper, it's from one of the most prominent figures in this community, a rabbi, who said that rabbis should make sure that women's salary are not too high for two main reasons. One is that the standard of living will not become too high, because if the norm in the ultra-Orthodox community changes, the families will demand to earn more and place more value on, earning more and making more money and buying more things and becoming more materialist. But the second reason is even more problematic in my view, is that so the husband will maintain his authority as the final word at home. So this is something that our interviewees, the women we worked with, were familiar with and understood that the attempt of the community is to keep them small, despite their high earning, despite their experience, despite their growing up. So if we take all these aspects together, the integration of women, we identified a kind of integration regime. And this integration regime included that integration is prioritized over equity, equality, and inclusion. Nobody cared about their feelings, about how they about their integration in social terms. The other way is actually right. They wanted to maintain their segregation. They told us that they rarely talk to other men or women in the workplace. Women were integrated and still are integrated as groups. There were segregated, gender and religiosity segregated workspaces. The state actually subsidized that, and we have several either high-tech plants or facilities that are women only, or even in Intel, they had subcontractors and labs that were for women only. And actually, rabbis and the seminars pushed young ultra-Orthodox women to join the high-tech through these segregated, again, gender and religiosity segregated facilities. And in those facilities, women earn about half of what they are earning in mixed environments. And again, we had community representatives that their authority was recognized in the workplace by the women and by the employer. And so we have a model of integration that keeps them segregated and well organized, and allows them to negotiate specific work benefits that fits their needs as ultra-Orthodox women, fits their religious demands or needs. Our argument in this paper that we've published already is that within this institutional context, that a matrix of domination, this conflicting demands from everyone, The intersection of religiosity and gender affects women's integration into the labor market, not only as a source of marginalization and discrimination, but also as a source of power and agency, power and autonomy. And what we were able to find is, paradoxically maybe, within this matrix, that should have rendered them marginalized and weak, Haredi women were able to negotiate idiosyncratic arrangements that they prefer, especially in the field of work and family reconciliation. Remember, we have 6 children. We have a mother who is a breadwinner, but also a caretaker, and everything is on her, and she works, and she needs to have arrangements that will allow her to still adhere to parental or motherhood norms in the ultra-Orthodox community while working in a high-tech environment, which is often very, very demanding, 24/7, and so on and so forth. So using religious justification and their community's political power and internal organization, the Haredi women managed to secure gender-segregated working spaces that were seen as crucial to protecting their modesty, especially for those workers who are still single. They were also able to negotiate reduced working hours, exemption from working from home after hours, because they don't admit to having computers at home and internet connection at home. So if they take work home, this means that the entire community and their children and others know that they have internet connection at home, and this risk their position and endanger their position in their communities. And they took maternity leave every year or every second year. Most employers don't like it when it comes to secular employees, but because they saw it as coping with the specific needs of this community, they were able, or they agreed to this arrangements. So it's interesting to see that, given the sponsorship the state offered and the financial support the state offered, and of course the cheap labor that these women are, employers were willing to cope with these women's need. And while the reconciliation and work and family in the high-tech sector in general is extremely difficult due to their collective bargaining power, they were able to secure working conditions that secular women could not secure. And since employers often see them as docile actors who have little space for maneuvering within their communities, they rarely hold women responsible for inability to follow regular high-tech corporate culture and the grueling workload. So while these women were working 6.5 hours a day, they were still, if they were good, they were still able to be seen as good workers. So it is too early to determine, or before that the most importantly maybe, that is drawing on their high income compared to other women and prestige and knowledge acquired in their work, many ultra-Orthodox high-tech workers are transforming the division of labor in their families, building politically and personally empowering networks. In this picture on your screen now, you can see a scene from Movilot, which is an occupational leadership for Haredi women. This is a network of successful high-tech women and newcomers into the labor force. There are many consultants, career consultants. They're working together to allow and help ultra-Orthodox women to learn how to maneuver their work life and their home life and their community life, and they support each other in terms of gaining and securing their legitimacy within the community. And they also engage in women-only religious studies to build an alternative claim for devotion, for religious devotion. Their devotion is not only in the form of caring for their families and being modest and serving the community, but they are learners, they are scholars in the religious field as well. And our claim is that given the knowledge that they gain as part of their employment, they are changing their communities and the faith of their children. Many of them are sending their daughters into the high tech, and the daughters don't meet or don't have to struggle so much. And also, they also send their boys, their sons, to, on the one hand, prestigious yeshiva, but on the other hand, they make sure that the boys learn general fields as well and will be able to integrate into the labor force as well. So it's too early to determine the role of these women and other professionals outside the high-tech sector in shaping the Ultra-Orthodox community's reaction to COVID or integration in general. But we do know of several initiatives led by those women who have been pushing for more adherence to state regulations and attempting to build bridges between their communities and others in the context of COVID-19 and in other contexts to reduce hostility and encourage collaboration. Is women participation in the labor force the answer to the integration challenge? Only time will tell. Thank you.
Thank you, Michal. Thank you very much for the lecture. And now we can open to the question. You're welcome. You have already 2 questions in the question and answer box, if you want to read them.
Yeah, I kind of lost the, just a second.
Okay, I will read for you in the meanwhile. So
Okay.
Ilan Ross, our friends from Amsterdam, he's asking if the modern Orthodox Jews really be considered Haredim. And also the other question is, do really all Haredi communities expect, you spoke about shaving their heads upon the marriage, if they all do it or only the most Orthodox groups had this practice?
Thank you for the questions and thank you for your patience. It's a huge question, the modern Ultra-Orthodox group. My Sephardi student, who is one of the leaders of this group, they consider themselves Haredi, and they send their children to Haredi yeshiva and seminars, and they consider themselves as part of the community, although they attempt to change it. And I have to say that others don't see them that way. Others tend to see them as, rebels who are threatening the idea of enclave and enclave society, the segregation. It's a huge issue. Not too many people define themselves as modern Ultra-Orthodox, but in objective terms, when they are asked what they are doing and what they are not doing in terms of their lifestyles, studies show that about 40% of the ultra-Orthodox community belongs to this category. I mean, they go to the malls, they go to vacations abroad. In terms of their consumption patterns, they are very similar to the secular community. So it depends. As far as I know, they all shave their heads. Many of them are wearing PA. And this is a huge debate within the ultra-Orthodox community. Should they wear someone else's hair? Is it modest, or should they wear something else? And how long the head cover can be? And this is a huge debate even within each family. One of my interviewees, who is also she's a daughter of a rabbi. She is married to an important rabbi, and she's also a sociologist. She has a doctoral in sociology. Told me that her daughter, who is 22, wears a long, I lost the word, PA? A wig. I'm not sure it's a wig, but a long wig. And she told me that she told her if she wears a long wig, she cannot expect my colleague and her husband, who is a rabbi, to support her request to enter her son into a prestigious kindergarten. So even within the family, and this is a very modern family, this is an issue. But they all do. Most of them just cover it with a wig that you cannot even know that this is the case.
Okay.
Let me see.
Michal, I would like to allow Femke Ross that she raised, I don't know, the digital hand. So you can now open your microphone, Femke. Femke, can you speak?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I have no questions. I had too many questions, but it was very interesting to listen to you. And my idea was, how do the not Haredim women work together with this Haredim woman, or are they separate? Can you hear me?
Yeah, this is a very interesting question and a very important one. So in different organizations, different employers use different measures. So in some cases, as I mentioned, there are segregated work facilities for religious women only. And you don't have secular women there, and you don't have men there at all, aside from this rabbi, the person who monitors them. In other work environments, everything is completely mixed, but still they keep to themselves and they don't eat with others, despite the fact that usually the food is kosher. They don't talk to them. They don't go if there are social events. They don't join the social events. Managers often complain about that they cannot create a team because ultra-Orthodox women don't want to join the team creating events. So they don't really integrate that much, or at least this is what they are saying, because other ultra-Orthodox women are monitoring them and they feel that they need to keep up with religious demands in order to maintain their position in the community. If they don't act as they are expected to, other ultra-Orthodox women in their environment may report them. So this is very complicated. But still, they learn a lot from other women, and they collaborate with them outside of the workplace. So many of them participate in different initiatives, civic initiatives and organizations. And among the, I don't know if you know that, women are not allowed to be elected to the Knesset as part of the ultra-Orthodox parties. This is against the Supreme Court verdict, but both big ultra-Orthodox parties don't allow women to be part of the Knesset, and there is a movement against it, an ultra-Orthodox women movement called Bocharot, electors or electing. Many of their supporters are actually high-tech women. They are not, but many of their supporters are high-tech women, and they are very, very active in that as well.
But does it mean that you say that this work for these women makes them to have more emancipation? Because if I hear good what you told us, they stay in their own surrounding with their own people. Their rabbis are looking if they behave well. There are other people look around. So what do they win? They win only money, or do they win something else?
I think that they win what we call in sociology agency, autonomy, power. They are changing their relations at home. I have to say that when we started this study 8 years ago, you know, in the matchmaking market, women in the high tech were not very sought after. It was difficult for them to find matching. Now they are the most, you know, sought after shidduch. The yeshiva students from the most prestigious yeshivas are looking for high-tech wives. So I think that step by step they are changing their world, and they are getting more powerful, more autonomous. They know one of the things that they are learning is how to maneuver, how to you know, play with all these balls in the air and still get where they want to get. So yes. I think that they and the fact that so many other women are willing to join the high tech despite despite understanding the difficulties is an evidence for that.
Yeah, but that is just opposite the idea of the rabbis. They don't want him to be more powerful. They want him to earn more money.
I agree. But this is unintended consequences. You cannot always control all the consequences of your moves. So I think that many rabbis don't like it. I mean, one of the funniest things that we learn is that 3 years ago, there was a huge gathering of like thousands and thousands of ultra-Orthodox men in the Jerusalem arena. And six very, very important rabbis were on stage saying, girls should not go to universities or colleges. We should restrict their education, and we should not send them into the high tech. And out of these six rabbis, 3 of them have granddaughters who are working at Intel, and not in the segregated areas of Intel. They all work in the mixed environment and are still considered, you know, part of their grandfathers don't push them away. So I think that these are some of the paradoxes of this situation. But things don't go in one direction. They are mixed and complicated. But as far as we can tell, for most of them, this is, or at least until COVID-19, which sent us all back home to care for our kids who were not in the education system, I think that this allowed them a lot of maneuvering power.
I understand, but I have one question.
Frenkel, I think there are a lot of people who wants to ask questions.
Of course, you're right. Okay.
I'm sorry. David, you wanted to say something?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Professor, for your talk. You know, we come from a different position in life, and we have a different approach to the Haredim. I wasn't really prepared to give a little speech about this, but for us, religiosity is not a liability. We feel that the Haredim play a very important role in Israeli society. And our approach to all of this is really very different from your approach. There were a number of half-truths in your presentation. There were some things which are just wrong. One thing in particular, for example, you talked about the COVID response of the Haredim, but you neglected to say that all of the information, the advertisements that were given about the COVID-19 virus infection were given in Hebrew, in Arabic, in French, some other languages, and in English, but not in Yiddish. And you have a group, and the point I tried to make in my introduction was the Haredim are not a homogeneous group. They're a heterogeneous group. And there are a group of them who only speak Yiddish, except during tefillah, during prayer. So they were really left out of that equation. There were also groups of Haredim who, when they ascertained what was going on as far as the COVID virus is concerned, have become even more machmir. They're even more serious in keeping the law and doing what's right. So that's all. I want to say. Thank you very much for your talk.
Thank you.
And there are people who are on this presentation who are much more knowledgeable in this. I mean, Professor Avi Weiss is online, and
I have to say that I've mentioned that Yaakov Litzman was the Minister of Health, and I've written part of my interest is diversity management, and working with Haredi women mostly. When COVID started, I was surprised to see that when you have a minister of health responsible for everything, for designing the policy, and you have in the Ministry of Health, you have so many ultra-Orthodox high officials. They didn't consider the fact that their own community is speaking Yiddish. And I was really surprised. I didn't understand what's going on. I mean, in our theories, when you have representatives of a community in the body that makes decision, you expected them to cater for their community's needs. And the fact that it didn't happen is really of a huge concern. And if what I said,
he didn't remain Minister of Health for very long, did he? He didn't remain Minister for very long.
I don't necessarily blame the Ultra-Orthodox community, although I have to say that Karnievsky, who is the biggest figure in the Ultra-Orthodox community, who made a decision. I don't know if he made a decision or his grandson took over his voice. We don't know that. And my informants keep telling me, we don't know. He never appears and talks in his own voice. So we don't know what he thinks. But It's from him that the voice was, or the order was given to keep the yeshivas open, to keep the schools open, mostly for boys and not for girls. Now, only this week, girls are joining the group. So I think that it's more complicated, but I think that even your depiction of the case means that the segregation is a threat to Israeli society. And I have to tell you that I have a family in the Ultra-Orthodox community. Like half of my family is religious. And I have nothing against this community. What happened was at all, and I have also to tell you that I admire these women who joined the high-tech and several others activists who do wonders. I mean, I admire them. They work in a very, very complicated environment, and they learn how to move and maneuver and how to create coalitions. I'm stunned. I mean, they're really wonderful, not only because they are nice, because they are able to achieve so much that not many of my feminist friends are able to do. This is really a fascinating and you know, inspiring group. But still, the attempt to be segregated, so the attempt for self-segregation is, I think, problematic in terms of the future of Israeli society. This is, of course, my own understanding of the situation. And given I went to 2030 and you went to 2060, I wonder how Israel will manage to have an ultra-Orthodox community of, I don't know, 40% or 50% of the Jews if they don't join the labor market and don't integrate into the general Israeli society and go to the army. And I don't know how this society will survive. And there are other issues. Some of you asked about it, because there is a spillover, and because their political power, ultra-Orthodox parties and are pushing forward policies that call for gender segregation in public spheres, not only in specific colleges, in ultra-Orthodox colleges, which is something that I support. I think that the ultra-Orthodox community should have gender segregated colleges. This is very important, but they want to join the regular universities and keep segregated spaces within secular universities and segregated buses and so on and so forth. And this is a threat to the some of the achievements of the women's movement in Israel over time. So I think that the tensions are there. I think that COVID-19 pushed these tensions to the extreme. And my own mother, if I may say so, who grew up in a religious household and has the, you know, the most kind of, you know, positive reaction to that, defines herself as anti-Semitic after COVID-19, because she and many others felt that the response to COVID-19 in the ultra-Orthodox community has made us all suffer. So again, I have tons of sympathy to this community, especially to the women in there. But I think that this is a huge issue that it will take us years to somehow bridge.
Okay. Michal, we have time for maybe 2 more questions.
Okay.
So we have some in the question and answer box. Maybe we can go there and pick one, and then I will open the microphone. We have also some digital hands.
One of the questions is there cases of women leaving the Haredi community after being exposed to secular community? Yes, not only after being exposed to secular community in the high tech or in the workforce, but they are exposed to secular community everywhere. There is an internet and many other ways, and this was always the case. And so women and men, some argue that about 10% of the ultra-Orthodox of each cohort of the ultra-Orthodox education system, about 10% will be leaving the community. I have to say that in earlier periods, the consequence of that was separation from their families. To the most part, this is not the case now. Most families keep in touch with their children who left the community, and most of these people don't they don't become secular. They move toward the modern Orthodox, national Orthodox in Israel, living modern life, but still maintaining their relations with religiosity and define themselves as religious people. There are, of course, some who are becoming secular, and this is, and there is another, some people leave and some people join, so the community keep growing and not shrinking. Haredi women, high-tech is the most important sector. They are also joining in large numbers accounting and law. This is two fields in which women find their ways into. Many of them are moving into social work. This is something that is growing in this community because of the needs. Many of them go into graphic design. This is a weird thing, but seminars started having graphic design programs very early on. So you have more and more ultra-Orthodox women who are trained to be graphic designers. I think that these are the most the most prominent fields in which they've been working. But because the state defined the high tech as something that it wants to promote, this is where I think they join as groups, and they can manage to build their autonomy in a better way. When they join law offices, they join as individuals and they maneuver as individuals, and it's not the same way of integration. It's the same type of integration.
Okay. I think we can maybe let Beth Chernov to allow her to talk. Beth?
Okay.
Beth, you can open your microphone. Let's see. Okay, if not, we have another digital hand raised, Marcel Lange. Marcel, you can speak now. Marcel?
Okay. Hello, good evening. It was an interesting talk, and I'm interested in whether you did any research on the relations in the marriages. What happened, women developing and men, let's say, staying behind in a certain way?
Well, this is a huge question. At the core of the ultra-Orthodox community, men don't see themselves and women don't see them as being left behind. The fact that they are studying the Torah or studying halacha This is the most important thing for the ultra-Orthodox community. So they are doing the most important job. Most of my interviewees who are married to kollel and yeshiva students, this is what they are saying. I'm here, I'm not making a career, I'm supporting my family, and I'm supporting my husband who does the important job. But some of them, especially the older ones, are also saying, look, I admired this person. He was my ward, he knew everything. Now I know things that he doesn't. And I know how to handle my banking account and the family finance. I know how to buy things because I do it at work in millions. And so my ability to accept his authority as the final decision maker, as that rabbi that I cited suggested, I cannot accept that. And another phenomenon that we discovered is that many of the husbands are actually involved in their wives' careers in two different ways. In one way, they, as I mentioned, these women don't take decision by themselves. They always consult rabbis. They never take a job without their rabbi's approval. So in many cases, when a woman wants to move from a segregated religious women-only environment to a mixed environment, she will ask for the permission of her rabbi. And in many cases, it's her husband who sees her working so hard and earning so little because she works in a segregated environment. He will go to the rabbi and he will negotiate with the rabbi to give his wife a permission to work in a mixed environment. So, and in other cases, and this was very weird for us at first, men were granted workers' permit to enter the high-tech facilities. You know, when I went into these facilities to interview with these women, I had to get a security pass that is very complicated to get. Some of the husbands have permanent security pass to enter their wives' working environment. And this is, those of you familiar with the religious world know the notion of yichud. They are not allowed to be in a mixed environment on their own. So this is part of maintaining the yichud, one of the modesty rules. But husbands actually go into these working facilities and talk to the managers and talk on behalf of their wives. And this is another way for them to negotiate better working conditions, because they are organized and the men represent them. And many of them don't feel comfortable to negotiate, and the men do it for them. So it's an interesting mixture, hybrid of the religious world and the secular world. And but most of them don't feel that their husbands are left behind, and their husbands don't feel that way.
Okay.
I hope that I answered the question.
Thank you. So now, Michal, if you want to pick one more question from the question and answer box.
Maybe
if even I think.
It's a very good question. So about the boys' schooling. This is a huge question. I've mentioned Eliezer Ayun, who is a doctoral student of mine, who is one of the leaders of the movement of the modern Ultra-Orthodox. It's not modern Orthodox. Modern Orthodox refer to a group, to another group. those who refer to themselves as modern ultra-Orthodox, as modern Haredi, are trying to change the schooling system, especially for boys, and make sure that the boys will learn general studies in a way that will allow them to join universities and colleges. This is happening too slowly. There is a huge pushback. And as you can see now with COVID-19, the idea of giving away control over this young generation is something that the rabbis don't want to do. They are concerned, and I can understand their concern, that if the boys will leave the yeshiva, it will be very difficult to get them to come back and devote all their times and energy to studying the Torah. So keeping them in this environment in which studying the Torah and halachic studies and so on and so forth is the most important thing. This is crucial to the reproduction to the maintenance of the Haredi world. From the rabbis and the leadership point of view, this is a risk that they are not really willing to take, and the modern Ultra-Orthodox group is trying to change that, and this is something that we're seeing happening again, not in their view. I have no stand, but in their view, it's not happening quickly enough, fast enough.
Okay, thank you, Michal. Thank you a lot. I think we don't have more time for more questions, but you're all welcome to write through my mail more questions if you have them, and I will forward with pleasure to Michal. So thank you, Ruth and David, for being with us. I think it was a very interesting dialogue with many points of view, both between David, Michal, and people at the chat. It's always nice, I think, to have different point of views and to see one argument from so many sides. And this is the beauty of these topics, especially. So thank you to all. And
may I put in a pitch for the Shluchei Tzibur program at Hebrew
Sure.
University?
Of course.
Which I think would be appropriate. This was founded by and is run by Naomi Pearl, who herself is a mother of 10, and she is Haredi. It is a support group for a select group of Haredi students who are in attendance at Hebrew University in all fields. And I believe
and in a mixed environment, so many of them are students.
Correct, in a mixed environment. And she's taken them through Mechina and then at the university as well. I believe this is her 8th cohort. I'm not exactly sure. And she provides a support group where they meet on a weekly basis and discuss their needs at the university, and works with them to develop a project which they then take back to their community. The purpose of Shluchei Tzibur is not to make the Haredim secular and to bring them into Israeli society in that format. Rather, it's so they can take a project back to their community, which will enhance it, and they can maintain their Haredi lifestyle. So, for example, the first Haredi doctor was a woman doctor who was a graduate of this program. And I believe she is establishing a tract in the IDF for Haredi doctors to work, to be regular Army doctors, not just come in and do their military service in the IDF, but to be regular doctors in the IDF. Others are educators, others are lawyers, you have psychologists, you have judges, you have teachers. It's a whole range of people who they are supporting. So
it's because I accompanied some of them. I have to tell you, I worked with some of them. They were my students. They wrote seminar papers under my supervision. I worked with Naomi as well. I have to tell you that the way they move between the words, between the secular world and the ultra-Orthodox world is very similar to the way my high-tech women are moving between the words. So they understand the word and they are ambassadors of the ultra-Orthodox community.
absolutely.
In its communication with the secular community with secular society, and vice versa. I was, despite what I'm saying, I was stunned, maybe is the word, to see that despite all that despite the many ultra-Orthodox doctors, nurses, social workers, people in the medical field,
MD,
it didn't
PhD.
help. It didn't help to deliver the message. And this is something that I truly want to study. And I want to add to that many of our students some of them are religious and ultra-Orthodox and Arabs, and coming from the Israeli geographical periphery, and studying their own communities and attempting to understand how to allow for better communication between the different tribes, as our president, as Ruby Rivlin called it, different tribes in Israeli society. I think that it's crucial to push our research, not only the academic understanding as Shluchai does, but also it's crucial to push forward research on this group and with this group. I presented my findings to my interviewees and to others in the ultra-Orthodox community, got the feedback from them, and we're working together. And this is, I think, something that we should, as social scientists, we should push forward. Many of you are helping us with that, and I would like to thank you for supporting our graduate students who really, truly need the scholarships that they get through the help of the Friends of the Hebrew University. It is very, very important, and I agree, Shluchai is a wonderful program, but we need different ways to push forward this mutual understanding. And I think that it's crucial to build, and I think that the Hebrew University has an important role in building these bridges through many, many different initiatives. And Shluchai is one of them. Again, many of them were my students, so I've been working with them for a long, long time. But there are other ways that we need to push forward this understanding and collaboration.
Okay, so thank you, everybody. And I'm sure this dialogue will continue by mails. And so thank you to all of you.
You're welcome to write to me. I'll be happy to send you the papers if you're interested in reading academic heavy stuff, or discuss these issues with you. So you're welcome to write to me, and I'll be happy to keep talking and engage in any way you'll find interesting.
Thank you a lot, Michal. Thank you, David and Ruth, for being with us and for your dialogue. So hope to see you next time in our next webinar. You will receive the invitation soon, and you also will receive the recording in the next days of this webinar.
Keep well, everyone.
And stay safe. להתראות. Thank you.
להתראות.